So we'll go ahead and get started. A couple things before we jump into the agenda. Since we have Linda Rost on the line, I just wanted to let everyone know CCSSO is promoting Linda today on Facebook and Twitter as National Teacher of the Year finalist for Montana. So go ahead and make sure you interact with that post. We're obviously very proud of Linda and achieving that national finalist status for the first time for our state in about 10 years. And I think CCSSO hopefully will be making announcements soon on how they're proceeding on that. I guess, Linda, is there anything that you want to jump in and add here?
Nope.
How the end of the school year is going?
Yeah, it's going great. I just checked out seniors yesterday, and then we're finishing up with the rest next week. So we made it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for everything you're doing. I don't know if he's on the line, but Superintendent Klapmeier with the Montana School of Deaf and Blind requested to participate in these meetings. And so we went ahead and added him to our list. It looks like he is. So at the end, if he has any updates, we'll go ahead and let him, along with all the other groups, update us. But welcome to the group, Superintendent Klapmeier. And with that, I suppose we'll just jump into the agenda. So Tracy or Julia, if you want to talk about traffic education.
Thank you, Dylan. This is Tracy, and I will go ahead and start, and then Julia can talk about the technical pieces of the rule change. So Administrative Rule 10.13.309 outlines the process that OPI uses to make payments to schools for traffic education. And within that rule, there are a couple of dates that are specifically outlined. The first being a July 10th date, which puts the requirement on school districts to submit their class lists to OPI, including names of all of the students that have completed at least 50% of the traffic education program. And then it gives an August date in which OPI will provide the reimbursement to school districts. Obviously, because of COVID-19, we have many school districts that were mid-class with their spring enrollments when they had to put a pause to those classes. And so there are many districts that are not going to be able to meet that July 10th deadline. And we don't want school districts to be penalized in their ability to receive payments because of the health and safety concerns that halted much of the behind the wheel driving component of traffic ed. So we are working, and I'm gonna, if I can share my screen here, I am going to show you a copy of the letter that we are drafting, and Julia is currently working on the rule change language that will be sent out to districts that will actually allow for the possibility of amending that deadline. So school districts that have completed their traffic education program by the July date can still be reimbursed, but if districts need more time in order to submit that reimbursement, they will have more time to be able to do that. So let's see if this works here. Okay, can you see that? So this is a draft of the letter that would go out to educators. And again, this just outlines that the steps that school districts would go through for reimbursement. First of all, steps for districts that were able to successfully complete by that July 10th date. And then the second set of instructions are for districts that would need more time in order to be able to complete traffic ed. So this is all still in draft form. Julia is working on a rule notice for the amendment. And Julia, I'm not sure if you're on the line, if you want to talk about the specifics of that process.
Yes, I am on the line. Hi there. So what we're doing is we're not doing anything out of the ordinary. We're following the MAPA process for rulemaking, which allows us enough time according to the schedule of filing and publication with the Secretary of State. So we will draft a notice of amended rules. It will be filed by May 19th, and then We will receive comments on, it'll be noticed out to everyone on the list of interested parties, and then we will receive comments, respond to comments, and we're hoping that it will be published. I don't have the date right in front of me for publication, but I think that it's at the end of June is the publication date according to the Secretary of State's schedule. So right now we have a draft and we haven't yet submitted that draft amendment.
Thanks, Julia and Tracy.
That's all.
Are there any questions or comments for Tracy or Julia? And we know that Traffic Ed has been one of those sticky programs, being that it's challenging to socially distance while they're trying to get there behind the wheel time. Thanks for, I know Tracy's division and Tara Farrager-Smith have been working hard on that, and especially with Julia's help. With that, I think Ken has additional information we'll be sharing out there publicly today on finally getting these CARES Act dollars out.
Good morning, everyone. I think there was a draft of the guidance that we're getting ready to publish that was sent to everyone. And I'll just highlight a few things in here and then see what kind of questions or comments you guys have. The first part of this that I think is new and that we're announcing today is what the intention is with the 10% set aside from the ESSER fund. When the first documentation came out from the department that there would be this 10% set aside, we asked for input from stakeholders and schools on what would be the best use. And we received many suggestions, including one from Montpec about basically just allocating the entire amount in an equitable way to all of the school districts. But what the superintendent has decided to do, based upon requests coming saying special education needs special help and special education cooperatives really need help as well, is to dedicate $3 million out of the $4.1 million set aside to be specifically used for aiding in special education. And the way that we're doing that is because originally the thought was to give money to cooperatives, but of course that would be unfair to schools that aren't in cooperatives. So what we've decided to do is to allocate the money to districts on the same basis that we do the distribution of related services from the state funding. And originally we were going to take the amounts and sum them up for the cooperatives and just give the money to the cooperatives on behalf of their members. But that posed a problem because it turns out that not just the main allocation, but any ESSER funds that go to a school district have to be put into consideration for equitable services. So this extra $3 million, if for the portion of it, which is about $1 million that goes to cooperatives, those cooperatives then would be faced with having to arrange for equitable services for all of the non-public schools in their territory. So instead, what we're doing is we are allocating the money to the districts and then having the money pass through to the cooperative. And by doing it that way, the amount of that grant that goes to the district will be shown as part of their equitable services responsibility. And again, the requirement isn't that the equitable services be broken down exactly as the way that the grant comes in for uses, but that for each entity, the school district will make an agreement on what are the equitable services. And it doesn't have to be that the proportion that comes from this $3 million grant has to be specifically special education. It could be, but part of the other amount could be set special education too. Again, that's part of the consultation process. So I guess with that, the other use of the funds, we had already talked about taking $610,000 out of the set aside to make sure that each LEA or district gets a minimum of $10,000. We are taking the 0.5% for administration, and we'll be using that both for hiring an FTE for just a year to help with the administration of this grant, and also to work on e-grants and make it because this is, e-grants is the mechanism we're going to use to distribute the funds, and look to using this time to also take a look at e-grants. And as part of this, if we can make improvements related to this grant that that can be used for the other grants as well, that would be a positive. And I know there's a controversy, and again, it's in our guidance that the equitable services calculation per the Department of Education guidance is done on the basis of total enrollment rather than on the number of low-income children in the districts. And we are adapting that. We recognize that there is controversy around that, and that proposals have been made to the department to change it back to using the Title I methodology. I would say too that when I look through this, there are a couple things that I'm still struggling with on how we do this. We've talked about that the funds have to be used specifically for responding, preparing for, et cetera, for the coronavirus. And part of the duty for the state is to see that school districts do that. And how we do that is still, somewhat of, how do we do that besides just looking at what expenditures are submitted and then questioning it. The second thing that I worry about is there's the requirement that each school district will have to sign for that says that they will keep employees paid and contractors paid to the greatest extent practicable. And again, it falls to the state agency then to see that that's true. And boy, I just don't know how to do that. If, I just keep imagining this conversation where I call up the school district and say, is it true you're not paying so-and-so? And they say yes. And I say, well, why is that? And they say, well, it's not practicable. Are we done at that point? So again, I'm kind of struggling with that about what it is that we're required to do to make sure that we don't have an audit trail that comes back to haunt us. And the last thing is the question that Kirk Miller asked a couple of sessions ago about, can we use the funds to fill in holes that develop in revenue because of the coronavirus? And I've discussed this with a couple of people, and again, believe that you can make a case that that's true, but have a sense that that's not what the department intends. So this is one that I hope that we can get guidance from the department on looking forward. So let me pause there and ask for reactions and comments on the guidance that we're publishing.
Thanks, Ken. I just want to jump in real quick before we go to questions. Just at a higher level, it's important to the superintendent that we get these funds out to schools as quickly as possible. We don't want to hold on to it at the state level like some other states are doing. So I've been in touch with our congressional delegation. I spoke with Senator Daines's office yesterday, Senator Tester's office this morning. And we know that this dispute about the equitable services provision is being fought out at the national level, but we don't know how long that's going to take, and we don't want to wait to see the outcome of that. The guidance as it stands is the equitable services provided based on enrollment, and we have historically followed federal guidance from the Department of Education so that we don't put the state in a financial liability for these funds. They might change that down the road, but that's the guidance as it stands, and we think it's important to get these funds out to schools. So any questions or comments for Ken?
So hi, everybody. This is Kirk. And Ken, I just want to thank you for the depth of thoughtfulness and the complicated nature of all that's been involved there. I think that you step through this in a manner that really reflects, very well what we should be doing in Montana, except for the decision on equitable services. I worry that if we distribute and there is a change at the federal level, that it will be an extremely complicated mess to try to be able to have that $1.3 million identified that would be flowing to non-publics. In addition, as a result of the guidance that currently is available, and I totally understand that, that's the move to move forward. You may consider in the advice that goes out to school districts that there is some contention over that very thing, and that the actual allocation that would be the end product for district may need to be adjusted if that guidance is changed, just so that school districts are aware that, again, I'm looking at from my members' standpoint, the administrators who are going to be responsible for making sure that the application to e-grants and then the distribution of services to non-public schools, we need to give them as much information as possible with the changing conditions that are out there. So I would just make that request, that there would be something in the guidance that would say we're following the guidance that currently is available, but that there is some contention over that, and that there may be an adjustment to the equitable services flow of dollars for non-publics.
Yeah, well, first of all, Kirk, thank you for your kind comments at the beginning, and I'll say that on the behalf of the approximately 10 people in the agency who helped to craft this guidance, because like you said, it is very complicated, and I certainly don't have the knowledge alone to dig into all the pieces of this. And you're absolutely right. The extent that there is controversy, we need to be transparent about. We don't want to cause any difficulty to the school districts. And again, it's really hard for me to predict how this is going to turn out or when it's going to turn out. And that is an issue. So.
Thanks, Kirk. Any other questions or comments for Ken or the other folks that have worked on this document? Or the superintendent in general? The superintendent is not able to be on the line this morning. She was picking up her husband was having some routine surgery, and she had to pick him up. So. But any comments that you want directed to the superintendent, Cheryl or I could of course take. All right, well, with that, we don't have anything else on the agenda. Like I said, this information is going to be shared out today with districts. I know that at least Kirk and I have been receiving a lot of calls on it. So do any of the other groups on the line have any updates they want to give? So just so you know, I think Christy sent an email out about this. Now that we're kind of through the initial outbreak here and the schools have adapted pretty well, I think we're gonna, after this month, reduce these calls down to once every other week, or was it once a week? Yeah, Christy, did you send that information out?
I sent calendar invitations, and it's once a week on Tuesdays at 10:30.
Thank you, Christy. So yeah, of course, continue to reach out to us at the OPI. We'll continue to share information over email. But we think it's probably a good idea to just scale these back to once a week so that we can have more substantive conversations based on the information coming out. So with that, one more chance for anyone else to give any updates, comments, questions. All right. Well, thanks for your time, everyone. Christy, you could probably go ahead and wrap us up.